I wanted to start by giving you my story, a little bit of my background. I come from two lines of narcissists. They look a little bit different on each side. On my mom's side, I have some rapists and pedophiles, just really awful stuff. And on my dad's side, it's a lot of pride. My first memory of abuse was when I was 3 years old. I was being babysat along with my little brother, who was about 1.5 years old, by this mean lady who would hit us all the time. I remember her putting us down for naps, where she would watch us and she would have us close our eyes, and if our eyes fluttered just a little bit, she would smack us. I remember distinctly her putting me in a crib with the bed on the lowest rung, and I was just small enough that I could not climb out of that crib. I remember being scared, worried for my brother, and I was in there so long, I ended up wetting myself, and I was devastated, heartbroken. At 5 years old, I was pulled off of the streets, off of my bike, I believe, by a man in our neighborhood who brutally raped me. I had hit my head so hard that it knocked my spirit clean out of my body. I have broken memories of this, and it was very confusing at the time. I didn't have the words to describe to my parents what had happened. At 7 years old, my grandfather showed me child pornography and made me touch his erect penis. I was devastated by that, just heartbroken. I remember feeling so guilty, and I'm guessing that that's the reason why I never told my parents. I would play Barbies with my little sister, and in my little perfect Barbie dream world, my Barbie had never seen a penis before. My grandfather and his family, my mom's siblings, would be in and out of our house at various times, living with us on and off for whatever reason. And so that sexual abuse just continued on. At 10 years old or 11, my grandparents moved into our garage. And I distinctly remember having this beautiful glass blown heart that I'd gotten from my teacher at school. And I remember it was just the most beautiful thing that I had. And it was on this red ribbon tied around my neck in a double knot. I remember going into that garage to talk to my grandma and grandpa about my day at school, and somehow that double knotted tie and that ribbon came undone, and that glass heart just slipped off of that ribbon and shattered into a million pieces in that garage. That was significant for me, because things after that just started to get a little bit weird for me. I started to have crazy accidents. Things just started showing up, like my cousins, just acting weird, and the truth or dare games that they would play just got, really, really sexual, and I just felt really scared at this time. I had a pretty significant injury, got hit by a car and flew about 15 feet and landed on my head. It was a very awful experience in and of itself, and I remember just being so concerned about my parents having to pay for the ambulance and me being in trouble. And then I had this crazy accident where we were trying to catch our rabbits that we would let out for the day, and we'd capture them and put them in their cage at night. And we had this standalone chimney in the backyard that was up next to a fence, and there was this thicket behind there. And so the rabbits figured out if they just got perfectly in the middle of that thicket that they might be protected from us grabbing them and putting them in their cage. And so one day I'd climbed up that middle of that chimney and then climbed back down onto the fence to try to catch the rabbits, but slipped off and landed onto a sapling tree that was broken, probably about that thick, and it went through my shorts and up my vagina. It was awful, brutal. I have bruises everywhere, up my legs, up my vagina. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk. I couldn't talk. It was horrible. Then at 14, I had this, we moved, and I had this neighbor in my area who was about 16. He was in a gang. I was helping his sister, tutoring with some English, and he started to touch me. He started to touch me under the table. I'd be standing by a half wall, and he would go under my dress or whatever I was wearing and rub my vagina. And I would just be in shock. It was like an automatic reaction. And one day he nearly raped me. And at that time, his parents came home, and luckily I didn't get raped. But it was a very scary experience again, and my body just went into shock and all the same responses. And then I remember about this time reading a book called Ella Enchanted, and it's about, it's a Cinderella parody, and the Ella, the main character, was cursed by her fairy godmother with the gift of obedience, and so she had to obey everything anybody said. And I remember reading this and thinking, that's me. Why is that me? Why am I so controlled, by these people, by these adults? Why can't I stop this abuse? Anyways, at age 15, my grandfather again exposed himself to me and made me touch his erect penis. When I was 15, it was a lot harder of a pill to swallow because I felt that I was older, that I should have known better. But I was also wiser, and I knew that it was wrong. I finally, with all the clarity, knew that it was wrong what my grandfather was doing. I had lots of experiences with my grandfather, being very confused about the way he would touch me. And I started, before this last incident, being very concerned for my sister, and she would be, hiding under the covers with our grandfather. And I started getting really snappy and snippy, I guess, at him. And that wasn't me. I was a very, very good child. I tried to be the best help for my mom, who I just believed was, a victim of this same kind of thing after I found out when I was 15. But anyways, at this point in time, I remember being chastised by my parents. I had also had this aunt that was very OCD and controlling, and she wanted me to come over and help her quite a bit. And this one time I had my narcissistic mom and my controlling aunt making me move boxes and open boxes and close the boxes and, move things a millimeter and, and it was just really unnecessary. I would open up a box and she would look what was inside and close it. And then a few seconds later, she'd be like, open that box again, just kind of crazy. And so I ended up telling her, no, I was done with that. And in response to that, my mom made me talk to my dad when he got home. And my dad brought me into his room and made me undress in front of him. And he said, is this why you're acting that way? He never touched me. He just looked at me, but I remember it being devastating again. Is my body the problem? Am I the problem? Now, in context, I also had a couple of experiences where I had this disassociation with my body. Again, when I was around the age of 5, there ended up being lice in my vagina. Everybody in the family, we were living at Grandpa's house, and everybody in the family was getting lice in their hair. And for some reason, mom put me on the counter and with an encyclopedia, and she was checking my body, and she checks in my labia, and there's a bug. And so, disgusting. I'm thinking, like, my body is gross. There's all these bad things associated with it. And then I ended up becoming addicted to leaning on counters or, other things like that, like pressing myself up against things to kind of feel that sensation. It started with me being pretty young and playing with the kids in the backyard and climbing over my dad's rolled bar for his truck and just feeling this really good feeling in my body. And it was kind of something I craved. I didn't get very much touch or love from my mother. She was usually always in her room. There was, with her narcissism, she didn't want to be touched. She also had a lot of pain, but she was just always telling us that we were dirty and get away from her, and she just wasn't very nurturing. And my dad at this time, he would move away a lot for jobs, and there was a point in time he was gone for 5 years, and I couldn't remember what he looked like, and so just virtually not really there to protect us or to be there a lot of the times at the beginning. So when I felt this good feeling in my body, it was something that I kind of repeated to kind of give myself this feeling of euphoria or joy or just good feeling. Just, I don't know. And so that was another thing I just kind of wrapped into this is your fault. You have this problem. You have this sexual problem. This problem with your body. So when my grandfather did what he did when I was 15, I finally felt strong enough through the shame to tell my parents what he was doing. And the moment was given to me when, for some reason, I'm laying there and my grandfather's touching my body. He's, very controlling. He tells me that I needed to change and get into a nightgown with no pants, even though, I was trying to protect myself. It didn't work because I had this Ella Enchanted thing going on. And for some reason, I recognized that I was like floating out of my body, like as a defense mechanism, just kind of checking out. So I'm like up in the ceiling, and I'm completely zoned out of what's happening to my body at 15. And finally, for whatever reason, my grandfather says, "Is this okay, what I'm doing right now?" And I remember thinking, well, I have a choice? And I'm like, okay, it's going back into my body, kind of assessing what's going on here. And my grandfather was playing with my nipple. And I was like, no, this is not okay. And it was my first like empowering moment. But it continued on after that. And he asked me, if I wanted to know what a grown man looks like. And he showed me his erect penis again. And he asked me to take down the skin and watch the pink part pop out. It was awful for me. I felt heartbroken and devastated again because I actually did pull down the skin. I went to my room at first just in shock again, not knowing what I needed to do to feel safe. And my grandfather came in and was like, "Don't tell anybody. I'm sorry, don't tell anybody." And again, at that moment, I thought, I can tell somebody. And so I went up and I told my parents. And my mom, thankfully, immediately kicked my grandfather out. And I remember my dad sitting there on his bed just biting his nails. Like, he had no idea. My mom had never told us that my grandfather had touched her. And my dad didn't understand why my mom had these crazy behaviors, why she would always freak out on him, and they just had a really shaky relationship